the guy catches up with you. I hope. No, he hasn't.
Oh, the other, oh, okay, we're fine. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your service. Elections are both logical and emotional. On the logic side, I believe you would win hands down. But there's also the emotional element. In the last 3 weeks, your critics have attacked you viciously, and it's hurt you in the polls. Most of it I consider really unfair. How do you propose to convince me that you're electable as my Republican candidate, and the Barack Obama machine is just waiting in the woods with $1 billion to tear you apart?
Well, I propose to convince you that the one great virtue of presidential campaigns is that you are in everybody's living room every night. And that gives you the ability to answer charges like that. And you have to have somebody who is articulate enough and direct enough to answer it. And I think you'll find, I mean, it was actually very good practice in Iowa. 45%, think about this, almost half, 45% of all the ads run in Iowa were attacks on me. Now, at one level, I felt kind of honored. Although, as Lincoln once said of the man who was offered a chance to be tarred and feathered and taken out of town on a rail, that if it weren't for the honor of the thing, he'd just soon turn it down. So I was not, but I think it was good practice. And I'll tell you what it taught me, and what I've begun to institute here in the last week. You have to go, because I was running, remember, I got to be the front runner on a totally positive campaign. Shocked everybody, hardly including me. I mean, we didn't think I'd become the front runner until probably March. And so we were not ready for the difference in speed and intensity when you become the front runner. But part of what it taught me is you have to run a campaign of contrast. And you have to answer the negative ads very fast. Now, initially we were very slow for a practical reason. I didn't want to get into a dance where Romney would put up ad number 1, I would answer it, and they would put up ad number 2, and I would answer it. And since he has vastly more money than I do, I would end up consistently using up all of my money telling you what's wrong with those ads. And so we really spent a couple of weeks just watching and thinking. And I told people routinely in Iowa, this was a great experiment. I was going to stay totally positive. And the truth is, I did okay, considering the weight of advertising against me. And we were actually coming back. Because part of what happens over time is people get used to it. And they go, oh, that's stupid ad again. And so you gradually begin to recover. Now, my conclusion has been to draw a much sharper contrast. I'm not going to try to match the Romney campaign's negative ads. I am prepared to say, I am a Reagan conservative. He is a Massachusetts moderate. That seems to actually hurt almost as much as his ads. And so I'm prepared to walk through why do I say that, what is there in his record, what is there in my record. We're releasing tonight, for example, or first thing in the morning, I guess, a little video, a YouTube video of every tax he raised. And it takes a while. I mean, you get to realize how many different people he was taxing when he was governor. And there were a whole bunch of them. And that's just factual. It's not nasty. It doesn't have any kind of, slurs or anything else. This is how many taxes he raised. You know, what do you think he's likely to do as president? And so we're going to go through that kind of thing. But I will say this, and maybe, you have to decide this yourself. I do actually believe in the core intelligence of the American people. And I believe over time, in a campaign between a Reagan conservative named Gingrich and a Saul Alinsky radical named Obama, the American people would sort out the lies, and the American people would sort out the attack ads. And after a while, it would actually make them madder at the president for having run such a dishonest campaign. And I am fairly confident that, that if I become your nominee in a campaign of paychecks versus food stamps, that we will beat him by a historic margin, and we will carry the Senate and the House with us when we do that. And I say it as somebody who helped in '80 with a landslide, and who in 1994 led the Republican Party in a positive campaign to the largest one-party increase in American history. 9 million extra votes over 1990. No party had done it, literally, in the history of the country. And I'm prepared to suggest to all of you that a straightforward, hard-hitting, honest campaign will beat a negative series of lies and smears, because the American people are too smart and too decent to tolerate that kind of campaign from the President of the United States. lady right there.
Hi, Mr. Gingrich. I could listen to you all night. I just concerned
I just have to tell you, that's what my grandmother was always worried about. She said, quit talking.
I have a son who's serving in the U.S. Air Force, and another son who just I heard a lot of talk about cuts to the military, and I just want to know what you have to say about that.
Well, first of all, thank you for the service your family is giving our country. And as an Army brat, I know what the family goes through, and I'm really, really grateful to you for the patriotism you're showing. You know, this is actually George Washington's command flag. This was flown at Valley Forge in front of his headquarters. And a friend of mine got it for me from Mount Vernon. And it's a great reminder. I've written 3 novels now about Washington. And it's easy to forget. When the Constitutional Convention met in Philadelphia, the person who presided was George Washington. When they wrote the Constitution, and they said the president was commander-in-chief, they were actually sitting with being presided over by a man who for 8 years was the commander-in-chief. So this was not some vague phrase. They knew precisely what they meant, because with the exception of 1 week at Mount Vernon, he had been in the field fighting the British for 8 years. And they expected the President of the United States to take as his highest obligation the protection of the United States. The current president's proposal the other day is a shameful, risk-taking abandonment of the security of the United States in a dangerous world, and sets up the potential for extraordinary risks that could easily put us in a more vulnerable position than any time since Pearl Harbor in 1941. It is a terrible budget with terrible consequences for our national security. This is a person who has no idea how much danger he's putting this country in. Let me be clear. In 1981, during the Reagan buildup, I helped found the Military Reform Caucus on the grounds that while we were hawks, we were cheap hawks. I believe in reforming the Pentagon as much as any other agency. I believe in cutting out unnecessary levels of bureaucracy everywhere. I believe in saving money wherever we can. But the first obligation of the government of the United States is to have an intelligence system, a diplomatic system, and a military system which keeps us safe from foreign enemies, and there is no other expenditure more important than ensuring that we are physically safe from those who would kill us, and this president doesn't get it. He thinks he can talk to the Taliban. The other day they had a meeting with Maliki of Iraq, and Maliki brought a Revolutionary Guard brigade commander from the Iranian system with him and his party. Now, either the White House didn't know this guy was a Revolutionary Guard brigade commander, or they didn't care. This man had been in charge of killing Americans. And this is an administration that is literally, I think, in our modern history, I can't think of anyone, except maybe Buchanan in the 1850s, who is so utterly, totally disregarding the threats of the United States and running the risk that Barack Obama is running for the safety of the United States. So that I would strongly oppose what he's trying to do with the defense budget. Okay.
Mr. Speaker, I've been a great admirer of yours for many years, and I think clearly you're the most brilliant man in politics today. But you have disappointed me on certain occasions, and one of them is this whole business of man-made global warming, which you've bought into in the past. Now, over the past year or so, we've had these emails come out from these so-called scientists that have totally falsified all the data that these computer models are based on. You know, if a pharmaceutical company did something like this, those guys would be in jail. Now, do you still believe in man-made global warming after after all this has happened?
Well, what I believe is that the truth is we don't know. I mean, you may be prepared to say you're certain it isn't happening. We can find you all sorts of scientists, including ones that aren't being dishonest, who will say they're certain it is happening. But what I am certain of is that there is no evidence that would lead one to a gigantic program like cap and trade based on the computer theory. And I have never favored cap and trade. If you go to Newt.org, you will see that the day that Al Gore testified in favor of that bill, I testified against it. And I pointed out, for example, that the bill was huge, it was a monstrosity. It included, for example, federal regulation of jacuzzis. And cap and trade became the latest excuse for the left to take over total control of our society through bureaucracy. That's what that was about. So my view has always been that it's prudent. If you can go to nuclear power, that's fine. If you can go to solar power, that's fine. But I would not go to any kind of extraordinary effort to avoid global warming, A, because I don't think that we have absolute proof it's happening, and B, because there are a lot of other easier ways to solve things. The Dutch were faced with the problem of the ocean. They learned how to build dikes. They didn't try to lower the sea. And so there are a lot of different ways to solve problems. Al Gore just happened to find the dumbest one and make that the battle cry of the left. But we should get, see, I want somebody, can we get a microphone back up here in a second? And so, there you go, thank you. I have to tell all of you, as a former teacher, it is very unnerving to have people directly behind you and you wonder, what are they doing?
I'm a huge fan of Mr. Speaker. Thank you for coming tonight. We have troops in over 100 countries in the world. We've had troops in Germany and Japan since 1945. Can we at least bring the troops home from Germany and Japan?
I think that's actually a very good question. And again, I think it depends when you say we have troops in 100 countries in the world. Sometimes they're 12-man training detachments. I mean, it's not, so I wouldn't jump to some conclusion that we have garrisons everywhere. But I was an Army brat serving, my dad served in Orléans, France, and then in Stuttgart, Germany. I have to confess, when I read that the Africa Command is based in Stuttgart, having taught geography, I begin to ask, why would you put an African command in Stuttgart, which has not been near Africa at all in recent times? And what happens, of course, is the military has limited budgets. They have all of these facilities they already own. They're all over the planet. But my dad was assigned to Germany for the purpose of defending the inner-German border against the Soviet Union. The inner-German border is long gone. We now have a unified Germany. The Soviet Union is now long gone. The odds against a Russian general attack on Western Europe are pretty long. And I would really question why, and Germany is a very expensive country. So I would want to look country by country at what should a 21st century deployment be like. Now I want to draw a distinction. I am not in the Ron Paul tradition. I think we should worry about Iran. I think we should worry about defending ourselves overseas. I think we are far better to defeat our enemies 3,000 miles from here than we are to defeat them 3 miles from here. And so I'm prepared to do that. But I'm sympathetic with the idea. Let's go back and review all of it and not assume automatically that we're going to keep systems out of the past just because they're sitting there. And I think we could save a great deal of money and actually increase the agility and flexibility of our military by doing that. Okay. Well, this young lady right here.
Mr. Speaker, I really hope that you have the chance to debate against President Obama, because you would definitely show the nation that he should not be elected for a second term. My question is, Ron Paul promises in his first year to cut $1 trillion from the budget. What is the biggest thing that you think that you would do in your first year in office?
That's a really good question. Let me point out, by the way, that nobody has actually said to him, show us the list. Because you try to take $1 trillion, which is about every fourth dollar, and then take out interest payments, which under the Constitution you can't avoid paying. And you're down to cutting almost every third dollar federal spending. Now, you try to actually build, I mean, I helped balance the budget 4 years in a row. I have a fair amount of knowledge about how to do this. You try to take $1 trillion in 1 year, and you are talking about such a high level of carnage. It's a great slogan. It is an absolute fantasy as a policy. It's not doable in the real world, and there's not a person in this room when you finally saw what it cost, in terms of institutions closed, people abandoned. So, I mean, I think this is one of the challenges when you get these very bold ideas, is somebody has to come along and say, okay, show me the list. Show me the trillion. And so it's dangerous. I would do a couple of things. One of the first really big things I want to work on is to replace the 130-year-old civil service system with a model that fits with Lean Six Sigma and modern management. I do believe we can save $500 billion a year by going to modern management. I would also build a list of agencies to close. I really don't understand why we need a Department of Housing and Urban Development in Washington, D.C., when that could all be block granted back to the states and allow the states to run it in a much more decentralized way. I would block grant Medicaid back to the states, allow the states to run it. We have a proposal, we went through and built a list. There are 185 federal programs for low-income Americans. Now think about that. There are 185 separate silos, each with their own bureaucracy, each with their own red tape, each with their own rules and regulations, which means when they hit the states, you have offices to deal with each one. It's a mess. And so we're proposing bundle them into one block grant to help low-income Americans, send it back to the states, and give them the opportunity to figure out how to solve it. Washington hasn't solved these problems. The idea that we're somehow brighter and smarter in D.C., I don't think people in Washington know dramatically more about New Hampshire than people in Congress. So I would go through the system that way. I would eliminate virtually all the regulations of the Department of Education and return power back home to you and your teacher and your parents. There are a number of steps like that we need to do. But I would also, the most important thing in the short run, the most immediate thing, would be to rebuild our energy systems, which will create a huge number of jobs. Remember, North Dakota, where the Bakken field is 25 times bigger than the U.S. Geological Survey thought 10 years ago. That's 2,500%, not 25% bigger. 25 times bigger. They now have 3.2% unemployment. They've lowered the state taxes 7 times because there's so much revenue coming in. But there's a secret. The Bakken fields are private land. So the bureaucrats couldn't stop it. If we had that kind of development on federal land, we would generate over 1 million new jobs. We would generate hundreds of billions of royalties to the federal government. We'd have a major step towards balancing the budget so your generation wouldn't have to pay it off. And so I would look at economic growth, dramatic development of energy systems, and reform and controlling spending, all three simultaneously as the keys. And finally, the thing I want to do most for your generation is, as president, I would want to be the leader who says to the country, being American really is exceptional. Your rights, the right of every young person here tonight, comes from your Creator. God has endowed you in a unique way. And you are endowed with unalienable rights, which no bureaucrat, no judge, no politician can take from you. And the job of our generation is to renew and rebuild and revitalize America. So when you inherit it, it is the freest, safest, and most prosperous country in the world. And I want to communicate that.